Good morning, everyone. It's Lee Henson, president and founder of AgileDad, and it's time for today's edition of the Daily Stand-Up. Without any further ado, let's get started. So the question that I got today stems from a question that I got asked many, many moons ago, and it just came up again in one of my classes. People are asking, how are estimates ever helpful for developers? Or are estimates helpful for the people who are doing the work, for the team members? We all know that the whole want for estimates, the needs for estimates stems from stakeholders and clients that are constantly asking for estimates. And they want to know how to be able to plan, prioritize, and become predictive of dates when things are going to be delivered. All true. But for the person who's doing the work, they're often reluctant to estimate because they feel like you're holding their feet to the fire. There's some level of accountability when they give that estimate, right? So if doing something always seems to cause you trouble, why keep doing it, right? You don't want to always do the same thing. We mentioned yesterday in the podcast that doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is a definition of insanity, right? So while I sympathize with that way of thinking and I sympathize with the people who are doing these things, the truth is estimates can actually benefit teams. So let me explain. Over time, they can help you be viewed better in the eyes of the stakeholders and give you more bargaining power to petition for things that you need. So my experience has been that when team members are held accountable for estimates, it helps them learn to do things better, and it helps them make sure that they're on the same page with the product owners and with the stakeholders and with other people, right? Instead of them looking at every estimate saying, how is this going to be used against me? They can look at it and say, hey, let's celebrate that we achieved that estimate, or that we hit our goal, or that we finished something in the right amount of time. Um, you know, but the trick is, if you finish late, or if you notice things that weren't there before, you do discovery as you go and find out something that you didn't know early, you know, it brands you as a failure. That's the easiest way for me to say it. But failure is not necessarily a bad thing, right? I think that once you progress through and understand that, managers aren't there to persecute or prosecute you, that managers are there to help you. And even though they get mad when you finish late, I think it's important for them to recognize that you did finish and celebrate that you finished. I think that when leaders switch from being a manager to a servant leader, where they're still holding people accountable, but they're celebrating success instead of punishing failure, that's when you start to see this pendulum shift, right? That's where you start to see things move. Um, Developers, if you let them do their thing, are generally chronically optimistic. They tend to underestimate how long they think it's going to take for them to do something, and they become incredibly overly optimistic about all the things they can do. But it's not because they're trying to lie, it's because they are really happy people and they want to get things done, and they really feel like their strengths are good enough to get them through and to do the things that they need to do. I think that when you push back on a team's estimates and you make them reevaluate, and sometimes it embarrasses them, or sometimes it's something that they feel like, wow, they don't trust me. The honesty thing and trust comes in, and people will come entrenched in dishonesty, and that things that people start looking for a better approach, right? So I think that when we're giving these estimates, that these estimates, if done correctly by the team, should afford them some bargaining power. I know you heard me say that earlier, and people are like, well, how bargaining power? So, I think that when the stakeholders are encouraged that the team's going to deliver, and the team estimates in such a way that it's not just something arbitrary that's going to get them in trouble, then their estimates are better, they're more accurate, and they have a higher degree of success rate. So if this is true, then why are some teams better at estimating than others, right? If you dig deeper, you'll find that the teams who gave better estimates on the past projects or on the most recent projects are the ones that have better relationships with the stakeholders. So if you looked at that as a catalyst, a relationship between the stakeholders who are expecting a product to be delivered and the teams who are actually building it, the stakeholders listen when those teams said, hey, that this deadline is impossible, or hey, we need this to be successful, right? So the question then becomes, what happens when a team is just really bad at estimating, or they refuse to try, or they're not even interested? Could you picture a team that just refuses to estimate? They have no history of delivering on their estimates. They walk around or swim around or whatever the case may be and say, hey, this is what it is. And they don't want to estimate. And I think part of this is that they've been burned in the past, right? Or imagine a team that's poor at estimating because they have a poor track record of delivering on what they say is possible. So they've given up hope, right? They give up their will to live and they just let things fly. When their boss comes to the team and outlines a set of functionality and asks the team how long it's going to take, hitting that goal really needs to be delivered in 6 months if possible, for example. The team estimates the work and decides it's going to take much longer than 6 months, up to a year. They explain that they need more people, more time, or can deliver a shorter set of features, a shorter stack in 6 months, but that functionality that's being requested is impossible in 6 months, right? The boss's likely response is, just get it done in 6 months. We'll figure it out, right? Now, before we fall back and say Parkinson's law, that if you give somebody 6 months to do something, they should be able to achieve it in 6 months, and before we go on and say that the boss is a jerk, this team had a history of poor estimation. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to finish or not going to finish, but it also doesn't mean that they earn the right to fight back based on what I knew, right, at the time, or what they knew at the time. And I think that's the key here. So a good estimating history is going to elevate your results. If you have teams that do estimate well, most teams aren't perfect, but if they have good estimates, right? Maybe on a past project, they told the boss they could deliver in April or May, and they finished right before the end of May. That's solid, right? On another project, team members said it would take 3 months, and they delivered right at the deadline, but did have to postpone a couple of fairly small product backlog features to get there. So they're not perfect estimators, but they end up being pretty good, right? So this is where I call it center mass. I picture people throwing darts at a dartboard, or shooting a bow and arrow, or shooting a crossbow, or shooting a firearm or a long rifle, or maybe they're getting drunk and throwing axes in a bar because someone thought that was a good idea. By the way, I do really think that the length and girth of your beard proportionally improves how well you can throw an axe. Just saying. I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds right. I think that when you figure this out, that different teams are going to deliver work different ways. And I think it's because they have different experiences, different tools, and things that are happening. And I think there's a powerful drive to get people to the point where they can, or teams to the point where they can feel confident in their estimates and not feel like they're going to be buried because they gave an estimate. So the boss asks the teams to deliver a certain amount of functionality in 6 months. The team estimates the work, takes it under consideration, and then ultimately tells the boss that it's just too much. Realistically, that would take 8 or 9 months. The boss tells the team, well, do it anyway. Just like the first team's going to do it, right? And I think that when you push like that the team has provided a bunch of credible estimates in the past, so the boss needs to pay better attention to what they're trying to do. But the boss is even going to push that team harder and treat the team, as if, hey, this just needs to be done. When instead they should be treating the team as an equal partner in solving their shared problem. Totally agree. So I think the key to getting this right is having a healthy respect for relationship between the teams and the people doing the work, between the teams and the people administering the work, between the product owners, between the release planners and the engineers. It's just important to build all those different relationships. In addition, I think that, if you look at this from a development perspective, from a person who's building the product or service perspective, I think that you'll discover quickly that their morale will increase as they realize that their feet aren't being held to the fire all the time, and that they have a little bit of room to breathe so that they can let those creative juices flow and create something that's really going to blow our mind. That's where it all boils down to. That's where I'm going with this. So do estimates help developers? You bet. As long as you have some initial estimate that's given by the product owner of some kind that gives them some kind of benchmark that's hidden from the team until release planning, and then you give the team the ability to compare their estimate to that benchmark estimate and have open discussion about the things that have discrepancies, I think that's where you're going to gain your biggest wins, and that's where people are going to enjoy the whole estimation process that much better. All right. That was a mouthful. I want to thank Mike Cohn for publishing this one. This was out about 3 months ago on Mike's website, Mountain Goat Software. good article, and it helped me through. So as always, we encourage you to visit agiledad.com, where you can learn more about this topic and many others. Until next time, we want to encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Do take care.